Hello, welcome to Manitoba Agriculture Crop Talk webinar. If you have any questions during the live presentation today, you can type them into the Q&A located on the bottom toolbar of the Zoom screen, and we will answer them at the end of the presentations. This webinar is being recorded, and those registered for Crop Talk will receive a link to the recording. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. I'd like to welcome everybody to June 25, 25. Kind of a neat coincidence, but we'd like to welcome everybody to this week's edition of Crop Talk. Today, crops are growing fast and getting more into the stages where we're needing to look more and more about disease control. And I thought it'd be a good idea to look at some of the spring cereal crops and talk about something that I guess we've just come accustomed to spraying for, but maybe just a reminder, a refresher on staging. We need to be looking for conditions that are favorable for Fusarium and maybe some information to help us make that spraying decision, because more and more producers are talking that conditions may be not favorable for Fusarium this year, but anyways, we'll get Ann to give us a talk on that. Then we're going to go over to Kim Brown, and Kim's going to talk about Waterhemp. There's been some, I guess, reclassification of the weed, and it'd be good to update everybody on that. And then into our crop scouting panel, we've had a few questions come in, so I thought it'd be good to get those addressed and go from there. So got a packed session today, so I think we'll give it to Ann and let her start going with her presentation. Take it away, Ann.
And your
Sorry, Lionel, is sorry, my internet connection. I'm in the office, but it's very just about to share my screen here. Oops. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yeah, can you just go to the display settings at the top and swap the view? Where it says display settings. Can you go to display settings?
Oh, right. Yeah, sorry.
Must have a very slow connection today.
Yeah, today we're going to be talking about Fusarium and spring cereals. We're starting to see cereal crops heading out. So applications definitely would have been ongoing in winter wheat now, but I think some decisions on variety selection, how to make the decision to spray, and some fungicide application. During is definitely our most susceptible prairie. So we are seeing the Fusarium headlight, and we're actually restarted the durum trials in our mid, because we are seeing some improved varieties that are better suited to the eastern prairies. But durum would definitely be the most varieties, then barley, and then oats. So just due to the way that barley and oats flower, they do tend to be less susceptible to. I always encourage people to look at the resistance level to a variety of diseases in Seed Manitoba when you're making variety selection decisions. So I just have the spring wheat page pulled up, and on the far right-hand side, we have our Fusarium head blight risk or resistance level ratings. At this time, the majority of our varieties that we have in Seed Manitoba are listed as either moderately resistant or intermediate for the resistance to FHB. So there are a few that are listed as MS for moderately susceptible, but the majority of the varieties that we see are listed as moderately resistant. So when we have these resistance ratings in Seed Manitoba, some people might wonder where those come from. So the resistance ratings for the variety of diseases that we see in the seed guide all come from testing at a variety of different locations um, before the variety is registered. So we actually have the FHB program at the University of Manitoba is based in Carman, and then there's an FHB program at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada in Morden, where they grow the varieties for 3 years of testing at multiple locations. The wheat is inoculated with Fusarium. So they use a mixture of different isolates from across the prairies to make sure that the Fusarium that we're seeing in the wheat is representative of what people see in the field. And then that wheat is irrigated to ensure infection. So when we do see infection or resistance level ratings in the seed guide, the pathologists have rated those for 3 years under multiple environments to see what their resistance to Fusarium is going to be. So it's a very robust testing system. So I just wanted to talk about the Fusarium head blight risk map when we're making our fungicide application decisions. So since it's getting close to the time when we would be applying Fusarium fungicides, I encourage people to start looking at the Fusarium risk maps now for your area so that you can see what the risk level is like, and that can help make that decision. So when we think about any disease, in order to have disease, we need a susceptible host, the pathogen, and then environmental conditions that are favorable for the development of that disease. So in the case of Fusarium, it's very based on temperature and humidity. So when we look at our FHP risk map, so the new risk map that was developed over the last number of years, this forecast is based on data from all of our Manitoba Ag weather stations. So it's over 120 weather stations. And then the model uses the temperature and humidity from the previous 2 weeks to determine FHP infection risk. The previous model was looking at a shorter time period and looking at temperature and rainfall, but it has been found that humidity is a better indicator of Fusarium head blight risk than rainfall. So as I said, the warm, humid conditions favor the development of disease while crop is susceptible to infection. And we know even if we don't see rainfall in the previous few days, depending on the environmental conditions, it can be quite humid and moist in the crop canopy. So we don't necessarily need, very wet conditions to have humid conditions in the crop. So when we look at the FHB risk map, the website is prairiefhb.ca. You're able to select the crop type, so spring wheat, winter wheat, or barley. You select the specific variety, so that reflects the resistance rating from the seed guide for that variety, and then you can zoom in on a specific production area. So the new risk maps are quite grid-like. So this was one that I did yesterday. So we do see it's like in a grid, and this just reflects the model is looking at specific areas based on the weather in those regions to see what the risk would be. So at this point, or this was yesterday, the Fusarium head blight risk was moderate, was low in much of like the southwest, northwest, and central region. Because we did have more rainfall in the east, it was higher in the eastern region. So we do see a mix of low, moderate, and high risk levels for Fusarium. So when we're looking at this, this is just something to help make this decision. So if you're considering spraying, I do really encourage people to look at this a few days in advance to see what the risk level is looking like. And obviously this will change on a daily basis because we are looking at the previous 14 days temperature and humidity. So every day it will slightly change, but you will see some trends over time. So, maybe a higher risk, and then as things dry out, going to a moderate or a low risk. So cereal crops are most susceptible to FHB from the flowering to milk stage. So during flowering, when the spikelets are open, that's when the Fusarium head blight fungus can get into those developing flowers and infect them. So crops can be infected from FHB from head emergence to the soft dough stage, but they're really most susceptible during that flowering timing. So fungicide labels do report for wheat that you can apply any time from when 75% of the wheat heads on the main stem are fully engaged to when 50% are in flower. Um, Data and research projects within the last 15 years have found that it's really more effective for wheat to be, for fungicide to be applied once the wheat actually starts flowering. So what's written on the label is definitely a bit too early, and we would expect to see better results when you're applying your fungicide after the wheat has started to flower. And for barley, barley is a bit of a different crop because the heads flower when they're still in the boot. So barley recommendation is when about 70 to 100% of the heads are fully emerged to about 3 days after full head emergence. So just looking for fungicide timing for wheat, the optimal timing that we would recommend is early flower. And flowering usually begins about 3 to 5 days after head emergence. So we are starting to see quite a bit of head emergence in some of the early seeded spring wheat. The time of when flowering would actually occur really depends on how on temperature. So if we have a quite warm days, then we would have a shorter time to the first flowers appearing. And then typically the window for spring, if we want to hit early flower, is about 4 to 5 days. So when we look at this photo here, this is from NDSU. The photo on the right would be too early. We haven't seen any flowers yet. The middle photo would be the optimum timing, and you can see the yellow anthers on the wheat head, indicating that they're like new anthers that are full of pollen. And then on the right-hand side, it's too late for fungicide spraying or getting on the later side. So when wheat flowers, it flowers from the middle of the spike and then up and down from there. So you will see the first flowers on the middle spikelets in the spike. And then as flowering progresses, the flowers will open above and below that level. Also, when the flowers are, or when the anthers are fresh and new, they'll be like a bright yellow color. And then the older ones will be like that white dried out color like they are in the right-hand picture. So the recommended timing is early anthesis, and the field is considered to be at anthesis when half of the wheat heads across the field have visible flowers on their head. So depending on how warm it is, wheat can go from like being in the boot to the head being fully flowered in as little as 5 days to just over a week. So that's why we'd really encourage people to get out now and start looking. So usually that fungicide timing is about a 4 to 5 day window. If we see a situation where flowering has started and we don't have a really high risk of Fusarium head blight at that time, you might want to decide not to spray. And then say 4 days later, you look, your wheat is still flowering, but it's kind of in the later flowering stages and the risk has gotten quite high. It's definitely not too late to spray. And we'd always err on the side of spraying a little bit too late than a little bit too early. So recent research from North Dakota State University found that spraying up to 7 days past early flowering is still very effective. And Kelly Turkington had done research on Durham and Saskatchewan in the last few years, indicating that fungicide application is still very effective right till the end of flowering when FHP risk is high. So where previously the requirements or the recommendation was to go on the earlier side, now I would say the recommendation is to don't spray before early flowering, and that it's still fine to spray, near to the end of flowering if the situation changes and there's a higher risk later. When it comes to barley, barley is a bit trickier, and this is one of the reasons why barley does tend to be less susceptible to Fusarium than wheat, is that flowering does begin in the boot. So flowering begins before, the head is actually fully exposed and more susceptible to Fusarium. The pictures here just show the progression from flowering beginning in the boot to anthesis being complete. So the optimum time for spraying fungicides on barley is when the spike is fully emerged from the boot, and you'd want to wait until most of the barley heads have fully emerged from the boot before spraying. And this makes sense when you think about it because, if you're spraying your Fusarium fungicides while the head is still in the boot, you're not actually hitting the head. and you'd be going a bit too early. So the appearance of the first spikelet from the boot is a good indication for barleying that the best stage for spraying is just a few days away. So getting out and scouting and seeing when those heads are emerging is a good idea. And FHB does tend to have a reduced impact on yield in barley compared to wheat. But the risk of dawn infection is quite high, especially if barley is being sold for malt and there's more stringent specifications for dawn levels. And that's all I have for fungicide timing and the risk maps. Does anyone have were there any questions?
Yeah, there is just a second. Okay, here we go. How does the fungicide timing impact leaf disease? Would I rather err early if I'm targeting leaf disease? What is the risk for leaf disease this year?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the reasons why people are also tend to be targeting earlier was to hit that flag leaf as well. I think that this year we haven't seen a lot of levels or a lot of leaf disease, and many of the things that I've been seeing in wheat, like in terms of leaf issues, have been environmental or other sort of stresses. So I think that when trying to make these spray timing decisions, it's important to think about like what the most yield limiting factor might be. So if you are worried about Fusarium, having dawn or Fusarium damaged kernels in your sample, I think that I would recommend going for the appropriate timing. So waiting until early flower because it won't be as effective for Fusarium. And that's usually the most limiting factor when it comes to wheat. So if you had, really high dawn levels in your wheat or a lot of Fusarium damaged kernels, your wheat could get downgraded. I think that if leaf diseases were more of a concern, like I have heard of some people spraying earlier this year for leaf diseases, but I wouldn't delay fungicide application just to target the flag leaf as well. Or I wouldn't go early, sorry, just to target the flag leaf as well.
Okay, and if somebody was thinking of spraying on the early side, like how early would be too early?
I think that I wouldn't go earlier. So when we look at those fungicide labels for wheat, I think like I wouldn't recommend spraying before the wheat heads have actually started flowering. So I think ideally you'd want to wait until 50% of the heads have started flowering. Um, Too early would be before the wheat has started flowering. I think that you would end up with not as good of a result as you were hoping for.
Okay, and the fields I've been in so far this year, anyways, leaf disease hasn't been terrible. And I think one of the things we'd always say is that the crop is growing so fast that usually it'll outgrow it at that time period. So that's why I guess the point that you were making regarding spraying, when the flag leaf in the head is starting to emerge, this way you kind of get that double protection.
Yeah. And you still will be getting that protection for the flag leaf, spraying once the wheat has started flowering. If you do see a lot of disease and that's a concern, then it wouldn't hurt to go earlier, but then also be hitting that proper Fusarium head blight timing.
Okay, well, that's all the questions I have for right now. But are you hanging on for the rest of the session?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, if there's something else comes in, we'll answer it before we end the day off. I guess with that, I will get Kim to take over the screen and let's talk about Waterhemp. Looks good, Kim.
Kim, you're muted still. You're still on mute, Kim.
Okay, sorry, try that again. um, okay.
Perfect.
You good now?
Looks good.
Okay, sorry about that. I just was having trouble doing that, getting myself unmuted. Okay, thanks, guys. And thanks, Lionel, for giving me some time today. I'm just going to talk to you very quickly about Waterhemp and the Noxious Weeds Act. There has been some updates to the Noxious Weeds Act, basically as of this week. So I thought I wanted to update everybody. Basically, is my screen not advancing? Sorry, my computer's frozen now. Sorry. Not sure what's going on with my computer now. Okay, I will start talking and
Try
then...
using your keyboard and see if
Oh,
you can.
there.
There you go.
Okay, sorry, my page down wasn't working, but the arrows are. Okay, so the Noxious Weeds Act is a piece of legislation in Manitoba. It's one of the oldest pieces of legislation in Manitoba. That actually was basically started when the province started way back in the day. There's always been legislation on the books with the intent to protect farmland from noxious weeds. So there was a major change to it quite a number of years ago now. I think everybody should be familiar with that by now, but basically by 2017, 2018, it was fully revamped. And we now have a system in the Noxious Weeds Act that has different tiers of weeds rather than one big list of weeds that's on a Noxious Weeds Act that you have to control. Now there's different tiers of weeds and there's different levels of what you have to do to control or destroy those weeds depending where they sit on in those tiers. So this is just an example of the Noxious Weeds Act. This is where you could find it. So you just have to Google it. But always when you're looking for an act, always look for the corresponding regulations as well, because there's quite a bit of information in the regulations that go along with that act. With this particular act, there is only one regulation. With other acts, sometimes there's several, or in some cases, maybe lots of them. But in this case, we have one act, the Noxious Weeds Act. We have the Noxious Weeds regulation that goes with it. And the list of the weeds is actually in that regulation, the list of the tiers in the weeds. So basically, the responsibilities under the Act, and I'm just going to show you a couple of pieces in the Act that are the most relevant today. So there is a responsibility of all landowners or all people in charge of land to destroy or control noxious weeds. And so under Section 3.1, you must destroy all Tier 1 noxious weeds that are on land that a person owns or occupies. If they're Tier 2 weed, then it must destroy those weeds if the area colonized by those weeds is less than 20 acres. And if it's more than 20 acres, then the wording goes to control all Tier 2 noxious weeds if they are over 20 acres or more. And then for the list of Tier 3 weeds, the wording in the Act is that it's a control those Tier 3 weeds on land that a person owns or occupies if the weeds' uncontrolled growth or spread is likely to negatively affect an aspect of Manitoba's economy or environment in the area of the land or the well-being of residents in proximity to that land. So most of our agricultural weeds are in our Tier 3 category. They're weeds that are out there, they're on the land, and basically we want to control them because we don't want them getting any worse or affecting any land around or affecting any people around. The really bad weeds are the ones that are the Tier 1s and then to a lesser extent the Tier 2s. These are the weeds that we don't want on our land because they can be very, very troublesome. So normally up until now, up until recently, Waterhemp and things like Palmer amaranth and smooth pigweed, there's actually been 3 pigweed species that are Tier 1 weeds. Most of the rest of our Tier 1 weeds, and again, you can look at the list, it's all online. Most of our Tier 1 weeds are not cropland weeds. They're weeds that are in ditches, they're weeds that are in pastures, or they would infest like wildlife management areas or treat areas. So they're really not something that we need to worry about on farmland, except for these 3 amaranth species or these 3 pigweed species. So up until now, they have all been Tier 1 weeds, but we are now with Waterhemp, because it has been confirmed in 28 RMs in Manitoba as of 2024. It's rapidly spreading. It's been downgraded to a Tier 2 weed in those RMs. So as a Tier 2 weed, we still must destroy those small infestations so that weed cannot be allowed to stay. So if it gets beyond, because we know there's an awful lot that they're coming in loaded with resistance already. We know that glyphosate's not working. Lots of Group 2s don't work. Our Group 14s may not be working. Group 5s may not work. And we know we have some Group 4 resistance showing up as well. So we're wondering if our dicamba, fluroxapyr, some of our other Group 4s, whether they're still working on all of the water hemp that we're finding. So with that, we know by the time the weeds show up, they're too big to spray again, or whatever we've got isn't going to kill them anyway. So we need to be hand weeding them, or we end up mowing down the weeds and the crop all around where those weeds are. So again, a small infestation as a tier 2 weed still must be destroyed, but larger field-wide infestations must be controlled. So the wording is different. You do not have to go destroy that weed and that crop all around it, but you need to control it so that it doesn't spread. So it will remain a tier 1 in the RMs where it has yet to be found, and we will be monitoring this situation year by year and seeing how fast this weed is moving and where it's moving to, because it moves very quickly and it infests fields very quickly, and we can't, it's really doesn't fit the definition of a tier 1 weed. Tier 1 weeds by definition are weeds that are rare or not yet present in Manitoba, or they're present in very isolated areas and not moving around, they're not increasing. And water hemp is really not like that anymore, especially in the RMs where it's been found. So this is the most current map of Manitoba. Anything in red has had at least one confirmation of water hemp, confirmed by DNA analysis. The Pamarant species are difficult to tell apart, especially when they're small. So we have in the past been utilizing a lab in Winnipeg that does DNA testing to know exactly which species it is. Now that we're changing labs going forward, I'm just in the process of working that out. But anybody who wants to get some stuff, any plants tested, please call me and we'll work it out. We have another lab in Winnipeg that we're going to be working through. I'm just dealing, sorting out the actual details of that now, because we have switched the labs that we are going to be sending our samples through for species confirmation. So this is the map. So any of those 28 RMs now that are red on this map, water hemp as of now is moved down to a tier 2 weed. And for the rest of the province that is not red on the map, it is still a tier 1 weed, which means it must be destroyed when found. So just a couple pictures here just to remind you of what water hemp looks like. It is a pigweed. It does look like a pigweed, but it's going to be, sometimes the leaves are a bit longer and skinnier than a regular red root pigweed. It can be kind of a darker, shiny green leaf, not all the time, but lots of times it does have a different look to it that way. And the stems and the leaves and the petioles, so the main stem on the plant, and then the petioles, which are the stems that attach the leaf to the stem, to the main stem, those are very, very smooth. They have no hairs on them, and they're not rough and bumpy feeling like you'd feel on red root pigweed. There are other pigweeds that are smooth as well, but that is a dead giveaway, basically to know that we're not dealing with red root pigweed, and it could well be one of the really bad pigweeds. There are other pigweeds that aren't nearly so troublesome, but we do need to make sure that we're not dealing with red root pigweed, and then from there find out which other pigweed it is. So here's one picture for you. Sometimes when you look at these weeds from the top down, they kind of look a bit poinsettia-like. And in here in this picture with these two in this pot, you can see particularly the one over here on the right-hand side. These are really long, skinny leaves. They're a little bit darker green, and they really have quite a shine to them, which you can really pick that out when you're, when you're looking at them in a certain light. And then I want to focus on these little weeds down here. And so my next picture, my final picture, these are some baby water hemps coming up. They do have a bit of a different cotyledon than a regular red root pigweed. It is a little bit kind of shorter and fatter. This is kind of a good good picture here. These are all new water hemps coming up, and the cotyledons are the seed leaves as they come up. Excuse me, sorry. Are a little bit wider. They taper a bit more to the tip here, whereas other pigweeds, the cotyledons tend to be kind of long and narrow, very much like a cigar shape. So it is very difficult to tell what it is, what these weeds are when they're small, but we have to start to get good at this and know what we're looking at. Especially, we could very well be looking at mixed populations of several different pigweeds. For sure, we have red root pigweed and water hemp occurring, in the same areas and in the same fields. So we need to know what we're dealing with at this stage on these bigger weeds in these pots. These might be still controllable. We really need to be controlling water hemp before it's 4 inches tall. If I'll just go back up to the picture before, or even this picture, I think is better. You can see there's an awful lot of growing points on here. And the more growing points these weeds have, the harder they are to kill, particularly if we're going after them with a contact herbicide. But basically, you need to be trying to control water hemp before it's 4 inches tall, and you need to be using the most appropriate product you can use. We're going to assume that glyphosate isn't working, our group 2s aren't working, our group 14s may not be working, and now we're starting to see some misses with our group 4s as well. So this is something that we really have to be on top of. So going forward, again, send me any pictures you have. I'll come and take a look at fields when I can. I'd like to get out as much as I can to take a look at things, and especially if we have an opportunity to still get some product on here that might take out some of these weeds so that we're not dealing with them going to seed and increasing the weed seed bank for water hemp in our fields. So that's all I have on that. If anybody has any questions, let me know. And I think, Lionel, you've got our phone numbers and our emails and things. And please, anybody has any questions, contact me, send me pictures, send me, email or text me pictures, or give me a call if you've got any questions at all about water hemp.
Okay, Kim, one question did come in. The two RMs that look like two RMs that are isolated to the north and the west, is there any explanation as to how Waterhemp got there, or just seems odd that they're kind of out from that kind of solid area?
Yeah. So you're talking the Dauphin RM and over here in Ellis Archie. As far as I know, Ellis Archie's only ever had one plant found, and it was a very sharp-eyed farmer a few years ago found it when he was out swathing his canola and realized that there was a weed that was very, very tall above the canola, stopped, pulled the weed, we got it checked, and it was water hemp. We don't know how it got there. As far as I know, there hasn't been any more found since. Pulled it out before it set seed, but they can move any number of ways, and particularly they'll move. It could be in equipment, in dirt on equipment. These are tiny, tiny little. Well, they're a pigweed seed. So if you know what red drip pigweed looks like, it's a tiny little black seed. It's about the size of a flake of pepper. They're tiny and they can move in equipment, in dirt on equipment, or just, hiding out in any nooks and crannies in any equipment. They can move in the digestive tract of birds, and they can move very long distances that way. The birds basically are eating the weed seeds down south and depositing them as they fly north. And they can also move in floodwaters. So we do know over here on the eastern side of the province that a lot of the initial infestations were probably coming up the Red River because, weed has been a problem down in the States for many, many years. And we know it came up, and then as that Red River flooded and those weeds got deposited onto land, and then it starts getting moved around because the weeds weren't being controlled, or they weren't even probably being noticed at first. It was just a few here and there, but they are prolific seed producers. So the problem is even one or two plants that get away on you can really cause a problem. If you even start with a few plants on a field and do absolutely nothing, within 3 years to 4 years, you can have that weed. Like it'll be solid field, side to side. It'll be corner to corner on that field. This up in Dauphin, we're not sure where that came from. It showed up a couple times there on just one particular farm. The individual there had bought equipment down in the States, but not for a number of years. So it may have come up on some equipment that was bought from down in the States a number of years ago. There's just maybe been a few plants surviving here and there. On that particular farm, it seems to show up every time that farmer grows Clearfield canola. There are some great Clearfield canola varieties out there, but the products you use in crop for post-emergent spray in a Clearfield canola is a group 2. So you're not going to get weeds with that spray. You're not going to be able to kill them if they're group 2 resistant, and we know that water hemp pretty much in Manitoba is all a group 2 resistant. It comes up here already resistant. So that weed has showed up a few times over the years in the fields where the Clearfield canola has been grown, and it's just a few plants here and there. They're hand-picked. They don't go to seed, but it shows up somehow. So again, we'll never really know absolutely for sure where it comes from or how it gets there. In most cases, we just don't know. It just starts showing up, and then there's just a few plants here and there. So I'm not nearly as concerned about those two outliers as I would be over here, where it's really moving from field to field, and there's some really major infestations. But the fact is, it could show up absolutely anywhere. And if you look at the map of the United States of North Dakota, it's basically at the entire border of Manitoba and into Saskatchewan. So any of these RMs down here are very vulnerable to it moving north somehow through again equipment, dirt transfer, anything coming in on equipment, any waters flowing north, and of course wildlife, birds and other wildlife as well. So it could show up anywhere, and we may never know exactly how it gets there or how it got there.
Okay, and being that this is in the act, who's responsible for, I guess, keeping or doing the job of controlling this or enforcing it?
Well, the job of the weed control responsibility is whoever owns or occupies the land. So, and everyone is responsible, including the Crown. So that includes government land, that's basically all land in the province is covered by the Act. The Act itself is enforced at the municipal level. So some of the RMs in Manitoba actually have formed a district, a weed control district, and they have a board, and they'll actually hire somebody called a weed supervisor and they will actually have a spray program, a mowing program, and they have a program to enforce the Noxious Weeds Act. If an RM doesn't do that by law, they still have to enforce the Act, but they do it a slightly different way. And by law, they must appoint a person or several, it can be more than one person, and that person's called a weeds inspector, just a little bit of a different title, but exactly the same duties under the Act. The RMs have the responsibility to enforce the Act. So if a farmer has got weeds in the Act, like as tier ones, tier twos, tier threes on land, and they need to be controlled or destroyed, and the farmer is not doing that, the farmer may not be aware, or he may not want to do it. He or she may not want to be doing anything about it. The RM is responsible for making sure that that act is enforced. And so that is all RMs have the responsibility of enforcing that act on all land in Manitoba, including Crown. The Crown is bound by the act as well. So that includes government land.
Okay, good. That's good information. Great. Thanks, Kim. And you're going to hang on for a bit.
Yep. Yep.
Great. Okay, so from here, we're going to go to the crop scouting panel. And one of the things that I got a question the other day was what's happening at the crop diagnostic school. So I thought be a good opportunity to see if I could get Marla to come on and give us kind of what to expect if you're coming to, or if you're interested in going, just want to know what's going on. So Marla, if you've got a few comments.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lionel. So yeah, we've had a few questions about this too, and sometimes it takes a little bit for us to know exactly what we're going to be covering every year, just based on how things are looking and what we need to respond to within the growing season. But some of the things that you can expect. So this year, as with the last 4 or 5 years or so, we've broken the school down into 4 segments. So we have weeds, insects, diseases, and soils, and then all of the different commodities are kind of partnered in within each of those. So this year, and Kirk and I are going to be covering the soil section, and we are talking about nitrogen fertilizer management in wheat and winter cereals. And also we'll be covering some information on tillage erosion management and what you can expect if you're dealing with any tillage issues. In the diseases section, there's going to be discussion with Sonia and Callum Morrison this year talking about diseases in canola and sunflowers, and Darren Bond will also be joining them to talk about profitability of disease management. Our weed control, Kim can speak to this maybe a little bit more in detail, but Dennis Lang is going to be joining Kim this year talking about weed control and corn and soybeans. I don't know what else you might want to mention, Kim, about what you're covering.
Yeah, dry beans as well, talking
Okay.
about soybeans with the different systems. Like we've got Extend Flex, and the Enlist system as well, and then some different weed control in corn. And talking about some new and different weeds, just have a bit of a weed ID and talking about certain weeds as well. We've got a weed garden, so we're going to use that as well.
Perfect, thanks. And then our insect section, of course, is being led by John Gablowski, and he'll be joined by Jordan Bannerman from the University of Manitoba again. And this year they're going to be talking about monitoring and forecasting. That's the kind of general topic areas that we'll be covering. School starts at 8:30 every day and then runs until 3:15. We'll also have Allison Sass covering a little bit of an update on the weather every morning before we get going. And so those are the opportunities that agronomists have, or farmers as well, to come and attend. And so right now, we are full on July 3rd. For Agronomist Day, we still have some spots left on July 8th and July 10th. So if anybody is interested in attending, let us know. If you would like to attend, you can email mbcropschool@gmail.com. That is the email address, and just let us know essentially what day you want to register for and any dietary restrictions that we need to be able to pass along to the caterers. And then, of course, on July 4th, that is our Farmer Day. So Farmer Day registration is kind of being left open right until the last day. And this is being put on through an agreement or a sponsorship with our 3 commodity associations. So any farmers who are members of MCA, MPSG, or MCGA can attend for free. And if you are a non-member farmer, you can still attend. We just charge you $75 to cover the cost. And so if, again, any farmers are listening and want to join us on July 4th for Farmer Day, it's the same topics that will be covered and same time of day. So it starts again at 8:30 and runs until about 3:15 every day or on that day.
Okay, good. That's good information, Marla, and gives everybody a little bit more of what they'll learn when they go for that day. Is there any credits for the for your CC or for agronomists and they're looking for their CCA credits?
You bet. There's always going to be that guaranteed credit for the agronomists, and as well for those hard to find sometimes soil and water credits, because we're covering tillage erosion. And we'll also have Megan Westfall will be joining us probably for an early credit, half extra, half credit for soil and water, talking in a soil pit in the morning. There should be, hopefully about 1 credit that can be obtained in soil and water for any CCAs who are looking for that one in particular.
Great. Okay. Question that came into me yesterday. Producer wheat looks like it's fairly far advanced. Its variety is called Walsh. It's growing on soybean stubble. Planted on May 2nd. Good fertilizer program. Sprayed June 3rd with Vero FX and Bactrim, and was treated with manipulator and Mavero, and I didn't get the date when that was done, but I sent this around to a lot of the panel members last night, and I was hoping that some of them might want to make a comment as to what they're seeing and what they think might be going on, and maybe what would be the next steps in taking to try to figure out what's going on here. Anybody want to start it off? Kim, I see you're unmuted.
Oh, no, I looked at that to me looks like whiptailing for copper. So I think Marla I've seen that when I worked up in the Swan River area, and we did some copper applications up there. Some of them we did earlier in the year on fertilizer with a pro coat system on fertilizer that worked quite well. That's obviously too late now, but there are definitely some foliars. But I thought Marla would maybe want to take that from there, because that's what it looked like to me. It could be maybe a drift from something else as well, but my first thought on that was whiptailing from copper deficiency, and if Marla could handle that, that would be great.
You bet. Yeah, and that's what I thought as well too. And then the email that I sent back, and what we would ask then in a situation like this when we see photos is, again, it's discussed as being spotty in the field. Kind of where in the field is it showing up, and what's the soil type in that area? So depending on what that soil is like, occasionally we'll see copper deficiencies show up in areas of the field where there might be low organic matter, kind of sandy soils, quite often high pH soils. And so we have typically seen a lot of this show up in that Elm Creek, El Mississippi kind of soil type area. So that's one of the first questions that I generally ask is around that soil type. And then we can take a look at what those soil test levels for copper would be specifically in these areas. And this is the problem when you have spotty areas or patches in a field. Sometimes when you do a composite sample, you don't account for what's happening in one very small area because the mixing of sample can kind of dilute things and show an average that might not be that might not kind of really tell you what's going on in some of those spots. In order to truly diagnose this as a copper deficiency, that with that potential pigtailing or whiptailing on those top leaves, we would look at doing a tissue test. And so going in, taking a tissue test of the latest developed leaf or a flag leaf, if the flag leaf's developed, and putting based on what AgVise would say, if you were sending it, say, to AgVise, their standard is 50 leaves or sampling from 50 plants. And I would also not just go into the bad area, but if there's patches, again, where the crop is looking better, also as a kind of best practice, go in and test in that good growing area too, so that we can truly tell what the difference is between those two areas. Is it actually a copper deficiency? If that's coming back as a copper deficiency, then foliar treatment can rescue some of that yield back as well. Might not be able to get you right straight up to that full yield potential as you might have had with, a seed-placed application, but it's a good thing to be able to see, to be able to diagnose, and then see if there is a problem, so we know for the future how to best manage that in the future as well.
Okay, so next step would be is probably doing a tissue test to see if what we're looking at here.
Yeah, that would be my suggestion. If it doesn't look like, say, it's a drift issue or something, depending on where it's falling in the field, I would be looking at doing a tissue test in order to confirm whether that is indeed a copper deficiency.
How long would it take to get results back from a tissue?
They're usually pretty fast, depending on the lab and kind of how quickly you can get the sample to the lab. They usually have, a turnaround within a couple of days. So quite often, like a 2-day turnaround or something of that means it's a fast movement, which is really helpful because usually we're looking at trying to make that decision pretty quickly. The cost of application can be a lot, and if that's not the problem, you don't want to waste the money on it. So if it's possible to be able to get that tissue sent in quickly, that's probably the best plan, and then you know for sure what it is that you're dealing with.
Okay, good. Well, thanks, guys. And it's kind of nice to get the call last night and to get some advice as to what they can do to try to solve the problem. So thanks again for your input, and good to see. Okay, I'm not sure if Sonia's on or not.
Sonia is not on.
She's not? Okay. I was out the other day, and I was doing some field scouting and was driving down the road, and I seen this field and I went, geez, I haven't seen that in a long time. And mustard crop. And it was Sonia was going to be on. I was going to ask her if there's many acres growing in Manitoba anymore. It used to be a crop that some guys did mess around a bit with, but I think the majority of it is grown in Saskatchewan. But it looked really healthy and really good, and actually really clean too. So it was nice to see mustard growing again. Okay, a little bit of a crop update now. Where we're sitting, field peas, they're ranging from the 7 to 12 node stage. Grabbed some of these pictures yesterday, and we're not too far off flowering. In some of the more advanced areas, peas are starting to flower, and producers are getting ready to spray for disease. So that's going to be happening here shortly. Most soybeans are in the 6 trifoliates. Most advanced soybeans are in the 6 trifoliate stage, and the average of them are in the 4th. Doing okay, maybe growing a little on the slower side. Dennis mentioned some crops maybe were a little struggling a little bit earlier in the spring this year. Dennis was on last week, and he also mentioned about the iron deficiency chlorosis, and there's a picture of it in the bottom right-hand corner of what it would look like in your field. And again, in most cases, crop grows out of that, so not too much of a concern, but as Dennis mentioned, variety selection is important. Wheat crop, like Ann mentioned, a lot of the crop is the early seeded crop is heading. Most of the crop, the head is in the stem, as you can see in the one picture here, where it's just about to start coming through up the flag leaf. Canopy looks good, clean so far, and probably because we've been getting some drier conditions. You look down into the bottom of the canopy and the leaves look fairly clean. There is some spotting starting to show up, but right now crop is rated actually is pretty good. And we're for the crop report now, we're starting to rate the crop as to how it's doing throughout all the regions. And as you can see, most of the crop is in good condition. Probably the majority between good and excellent. So, the crop definitely doing. Cereals probably one of the crops that's having a few less of the problems getting going this year and less of the problems continuing on. So the cereal crops are looking fairly good. Canola, wide range of canola growth stages due to the long seeding window we had this year for canola. Late seeded canola is showing more stress, kind of the middle picture of the slide there. It's just seems like there's more damaged areas, more areas where it kind of stopped growing for a while there, and maybe flea beetles had a little bit more pressure on it, so the crop isn't quite covering the ground yet in some of those fields. Just not quite looking as good as the picture on the left at the top there, where it just got off to an earlier start and just covered the ground. And as you can see in the bottom picture, some of the early seeded canola is starting to flower, and I think we'll see a lot of that happening as you go throughout the region. There's more and more fields that you can start seeing flowers happening every day. So we'll start seeing more canola getting into that, early bloom stage, probably by next week. One of the things I was talking to some producers lately, and gophers are starting to become a real problem. And for some reason, they seem to be showing up in some of the canola fields and doing damage there. So another heads up for guys: if you've got a field that's maybe not quite doing as good, get out there and just scout around a bit too, because they can do a fair bit of damage in a short period of time. So keep an eye out for them. Flax has taken off and haven't seen too many problems. Anywhere from 4 to 5 inches tall, maybe getting a little bit taller than that now, and so doing okay. A few things that are happening in the area fairly soon. The tour for Wado is on July the 17th. So if you're interested in going to the diversification centers and see how things are going out there, Wado's on the 15th or 17th of July. Passaic is on July the 30th. PCDF is on August the 5th, and MCDC is on August the 6th. And if you're wanting to, there's the poster for the Wado Field Tour. So there's a list of what you'll be seeing. This is a bus tour. So to be there for 9:15 as the bus leaves at 10 sharp. They would prefer if you RSVP, because seating for the bus and for the meal. So if you're interested in finding out more information about it, each of the different sites and their tours, there's their contact person and the phone number. So give them a call if you're interested in attending, or if you're just wanting to find more information about what kind of trials they're doing there this year. There's a copy of the crop production extension specialists throughout the province. So there's where we're located, our phone numbers. So if you have any questions, if you're, as Kim mentioned, if you're wanting to get a hold of her or any of the specialists and you don't have their number, or if you have questions, give us a call. We'll definitely get you in contact with them and try to help you solve the problem. Our livestock specialists. There's a lot of cattle out on pasture right now, a lot of haying that's probably going to be starting over the next little while here. Some of the early and more more quality type hay is being put up now, but a lot of the beef hay is going to be starting shortly. So if you have any questions, definitely give any one of these people a call. They can help you out with any of your things from mineral on pasture to water quality to just putting up feed in good condition. Your MASC service centers throughout the province, there's their locations and phone numbers. A reminder that June 30th is the deadline to fill out your seeded acreage report. So if you haven't done it yet, make sure you stay on top of that. And if you need help filling it out, call one of the offices. Can be done online, and they can walk you through it if you have any questions. And that does it for today. Thanks for attending. Thanks for presenters for giving up some good information, and join us on July 2nd for the next edition of Crop Talk.